How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Bodacious Rant with Burn and Rye. Welcome to the rebellion, led by the brilliant and handsome Cassian Andor. Yeah, I gotta stop. When I do these voices, I feel like I'm gonna get into it, or it's just gonna morph into something worse. Kind of like in 30 Rock, where Tina Fey's trying to sound like Jamaican or something, like the ladies at her dentist, and then she starts turning into Irish. It's like two different things. Anyways,
it's like if I continue to act like Luther Rael, I may become Luther Rael.
Honestly, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a horrible thing. Like, yes, he sacrificed his entire life for a cause, but it's also like that was easily one of Skellen? How do I say it?
Stellan Skarsgård?
Stellan Skarsgård. Yeah, it's easily one of his best characters, I think, ever. At least, given I haven't seen his entire filmography, but it's up there. So if you haven't guessed it with the accent, the thumbnail, the nonsense me and Bernie are just talking about, we're talking about Andor Season 2, unfortunately, which is the final season, just because it's basically a mini-series. So we are definitely going to get into spoilers just because the show's now ended. It's all on Disney Plus to stream. Maybe Hulu as well. I forgot how that partnership works. But yeah, so if you guys do happen to like this video, feel free to give us that thumbs up. Or if you love the show like we did, ring the bell for notifications. And, of course, subscribe. This, again, we appreciate you all and, love you guys for supporting us and checking out our show. So, yeah, so Season 2 takes place a little bit after Season 1. Not super clear when Season 1 actually ended on, just because the way they've been doing things with, like, the shows and whatnot. The original trilogy, from George Lucas's original trilogy, that's essentially the main timeline you want to focus on. So essentially Andor is they do the BBY year or whatever. That's Battle Before Yavin, which is episode 4 essentially. So I'm not sure when the first one took place, but this one, the way it was set up, took place about 4 years, basically almost up until episode 4. And yeah, we just kind of keep seeing Diego Luna his character Cassian Andor really morph into one of the heroes of the rebellion that kind of got them to the level that they were in the trilogies and stuff like that. And we also are welcome back with say his name one more time for me, Bernie. The dad's Skarsgård.
Luther Rael.
Well, the actor's name.
Oh, Stellan Skarsgård.
Thank you, Stellan. I want to say Skellen, but I think I'm getting that confused with Brandon Sklenner from Drop and all that stuff. So. Stellan Skarsgård. And we got Stellan Skarsgård, Adria Arjona, let me see who else. Basically, all the cast from the last series, for the most part, came back for this one. And man, this season, I think, was better than the last one. I don't even remember what I gave the first one, but just so we could speed things along, and I'm tired of hearing myself talking, I'm going to give this season a hard 5 out of 5. I think this was perfect from start to finish. Yes, each episode is almost an hour long, but there's so much. It's like that joke, like there's so much detail and so rich of a story. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but it was just so well done. It's one of those shows that if you've been questioning Star Wars and stuff like that, like kind of I have been, like I've been kind of over it for a little bit, but I still watch them because they're not bad. It's just I have no excitement for it. This has brought my excitement back for Star Wars, and I can't recommend this show enough. If you were going to watch one show, whether it be animated or live action, this is the one you should watch because it is peak Star Wars. So, Bern, what did you think about this season? What's your ranting, my dude?
I mean, peak Star Wars is just the bottom of the iceberg when we're talking about the show. Like, this show has been just so special. Not only as a Star Wars product, but just as a piece of media, I think in general. I feel really lucky that we get to live in a time where, this series exists because it's such a deep and rich and challenging story. You can see that everybody involved wasn't just content with just making a Star Wars thing. They seemed like there was a lot of passion. There was a lot of ideas that they had and that they wanted to express, and they just so happened to do so within the gift wrapping of a Star Wars series. it's from beginning to end. This has just been a really, really great experience from the first season all the way up into the end of the second season. Just from everything from showing how the rebellion started, getting to explore the deep rich characters of not only people on the rebellion side but people on the empire side, and really fleshing out the two factions and showing us how we got to the point at the beginning of episode 4. Just the commentary on fighting fascism, what it took, like you mentioned, not only on the grand scheme of things but on a personal level to defeat them. It's just from top to bottom just a really incredibly well executed series, and again, to get that in the genre of Star Wars. It just feels like things like this don't come so often. When we're working within these big IPs and these big like ideas, and we usually get like the surface level like fun adventure stories where you have fun with it and you kind of just forget about it. I'm thinking of something like The Mandalorian, just really cool, really fun. Nothing wrong with that series at all, but there's not a lot of deep things to mine from that, where this one sort of takes the opposite approach, where it isn't really huge and bombastic. The really huge and bombastic things are the characters and their interactions and the tension of will they get away, will they succeed in their mission, and it being one of those things where it's a prequel to not only Rogue One but also A New Hope. We kind of know where this story is going to end, but it's just the journey of getting there that's just so gripping and so enrapturing that, again, it can only be done that way with really good execution. And that's just the word of the day with this show, is just the execution of it has been incredible. I mean, a lot of other things within the Star Wars genre have good ideas, but the execution is lacking. I'm talking to you, prequels. But this has none of those issues, and man, like I said, just it feels really like a special series that I don't think we might not ever get to see something like this again with Star Wars, but I'm just happy that it happened. So yeah, man, like for me, easiest 5 out of 5. I've given probably the best show of the year. It would be hard to kind of top it, and we've already gotten really good television so far this year with things like Severance, things like The Pit, and the ongoing series that are going on right now, like The Last of Us. But this show just feels like so much on another level. It's pretty insane. So yeah, I can gush about the show, and we're gonna be doing that. But yeah, overall thoughts, man, 5 out of 5. It's not even a question.
Yeah, like I mean, I think you also pointed out, like, while I mentioned it's peak Star Wars, it literally is just one of the best shows out there. Like, you take the Star Wars out of it, if you've never even seen the movies, this show is still worth it because it still basically explains what the whole point of the original story was. What the original prequels was, is like fighting against fascism and the power of the people rising up. So I think this show definitely exemplifies that. And while it is considered, I would say it's also a genre show. Like, this more like espionage drama, almost like a war show. It's so well done and so nuanced that, again, you don't have to think of it as a Star Wars thing. It's literally work for almost anything you watch. So, yeah, 5 out of 5 from both me and Byrne. Very easy ones, which I agree. So we're gonna get into spoilers things now, like the spoiler part, where we're gonna talk about some of our favorite aspects, some characters, moments, what have you. So if you haven't watched all of it, come on back when you do, because it's nice to dive in with us. So yeah, I just want to start off with just, again, what made this show, I think, stand apart compared to like Mandalorian and the other shows they've done, is just the characters. Like, these are some of the strongest characters I think that have spawned from like the original movies or even a prequel movie of the originals. Diego Luna kills it even more and more as Cassian Andor. And I think the other standouts for me were really just Stellan Skarsgård as Luthen, because he is easily the most gray character out of everyone in this entire show. Where last season, his monologue about what he's willing to sacrifice, what he's already sacrificed for the rebellion, and the whole situation they're in, the fascist regime they are under, the Empire, is like, I'm willing to sacrifice everything, and I continue to do that. I know there's no happy ending for me, but that's what it takes, are people like me. Not exactly like that, but very paraphrased. And the supporting cast, like especially is Adria Arona. I think I'm saying. I think it's Adria or Adriana. I think it's Adria. Her character as Bix has a much stronger arc this time around, where in the last chunk of the episodes, last part of the season, she had a very emotional scene that you feel for her, and you really, and it kind of almost broke me down a little bit because it's just so sad, so bittersweet. I think that's the best way to describe this show. And even Rogue One was very bittersweet with how that turned out too. Yeah, I just think the character writing is on another level with the main characters, like again, Luthen, Cassian, Bix, Clea, Cyril Karn, and then Dedra. Like how you mentioned that they're the two faces of the Empire that really get fleshed out, and you kind of empathize with them. But then there were plenty of moments, and the way they go out was just like, no, karma caught up to you, and that's what you get for being on the wrong side of history. So again, the characters are this is one of those few shows I'm like, I could watch it again and again because of the characters. Like it's so freaking good. Byrne, what about you? What was one of the things you liked about this one?
I mean, I think the thing that ties all these characters together is the idea of sacrifice. We get to know these characters, and throughout the series, we kind of get to see what they're willing to get up for their own respective causes. Like it's interesting with Andor being sort of the main character in a way of the show. The series is obviously called Andor, but in sort of a Mad Max way, he's just sort of a guide into the stories of all these other characters around him. And I think that was sort of like a smart choice, because we know where his story ends, we know where he ends up. If anybody who's seen Rogue One knows what happens to that character. So the idea of using him as a way of exploring all these different planets, all these different scenarios, weaving us through what it's like to live under the Empire rule, and meeting all these characters, does a good job of showcasing them while also furthering his own narrative. So I thought that was a pretty interesting framework for not only the series but him as a character, and tying that in thematically at the end, with him sort of being like almost like a messenger of the Force, not being Force sensitive, but it's like almost as if the Force is working through him to, get all of this done, which is super interesting. But yeah, I mean, what we see on the rebellion side, with characters like Mon Mothma having to sacrifice her own family, to be part of the rebellion, and her job, her home life, it all suffers for it. And yeah, like you mentioned, Clea and Luthen, sort of, they've been giving up almost everything. They've been fully consumed by this fight since before we met them in the series. And the flashback episode gives us a look into that they've just been doing this for the longest time. And yeah, like Bix having to realize that she has to give up her own fight to sort of allow Cassian to be fully committed to the rebellion. It's a lot of interesting stuff going on with them, and like what it takes to fight the Empire. It doesn't come without a cost. And I thought that was just it's a really good story when you have characters facing consequences to try to get their ultimate goal completed. It just makes the story more interesting, and it makes the risks that much more effective. It feels like anyone can just drop at I mean, we know how the story ends, but it feels like along the way they're able to use that to sort of ratchet up tension where you wouldn't normally have it, because the Empire loses already.
Yeah, no, I definitely get you. Like, I think it's kind of, oh my god, I'm blanking right now. I was so caught up in what you were saying, I kind of lost my train of thought. I apologize, but yeah, I think sacrifice is definitely one of the biggest themes, is in general, whether it be fighting fascism or just in life. Like, what are you willing to give up for the greater good, or something other, like whatever cause you're interested in? And yeah, Luthen and Clea's episode, in the last 3 episodes, that was one of my favorite. Like, it was so simply done and almost very, very vague, but it's the few moments we get in those flashbacks that really have just, the acting and the way they've written it was just like, wow, you immediately get the bond that they have, and what they've been through. So I thought that was really great. And I mean, speaking on the whole pacing aspect, I really liked how this was broken up. I thought, man, 3 basically hour-long episodes every week, that's gonna be a lot. And at one point it kind of was, but once you really just sit down and get into it, like when you want to binge it, it's pretty easy to just get sucked up in this. And especially this one, I feel like I got more invested in the characters because the way, even though they are like an hour long, the pacing on each episode is really well done. It doesn't really waste time with, frivolous actions or subplots that just was like that don't have payouts. Almost everything paid out for the most part. And yeah, I think some of my favorite I think my favorite like chunks of episodes are going to be like the first chunk. I will say I think and then the last two really. It's just the third year before Yavin, Battle Before Yavin. I was like, okay, it's not bad. I just think I like the other ones better because I think there's more just characters and intense moments with that, especially when it's just, we are knowing what happens in Rogue One and how that's set up for the prequels or the originals. I mean, it's you do feel the tension going as each year gets closer to the events. So I thought that was a really smart way to go about this season compared to the last one, where the last one was just very linear and stuff like that. So
Yeah, the episode structure, it feels a little bit more. It feels a bit better this time around. I mean, last season also had the similar 3 episode arc structure, but those episodes came out week to week. I feel like they're dropping the whole arcs every week, served the story a little bit better. I think, like you mentioned, that they made the pacing a little bit easier, to digest, especially in this like sort of binge format. But it also got us into that, that 3 act structure that we weren't having to wait a week to sort of get answers or get payoff. Like if you started it that night, you could potentially end it that night too, when the episode's released. And at this point, anybody can just like binge the entire thing. But yeah, like getting those beginning, middle, and ends, the setup and the payoff. I think, yeah, like you said, really helped with the pacing there, and particularly when we get to from episode 7 to episode 12. It just feels like the foot's on the gas at that point. Whereas, the first 6 episodes are, sort of a setup. There are interesting things that are going on there. And the last half of the season is only good because of the setup that it took in those first few episodes. But yeah, getting to see those arcs play out and end, within the smaller stories that we're getting that are building up the larger narrative, it worked really well. And yeah, I mean, I think 7, 8, and 9 is probably the highlight of the season. Everything with the Gorman massacre, as devastating as that was. The tension, everything in terms of the writing and the execution on those episodes in particular were just absolutely incredible. I think probably the best 2 hours of Star Wars for me personally. But yeah, it doesn't work without everything before and everything after. So yeah, everything that they had set up there, and in particular with the characters, as you mentioned, it keeps coming back to the characters and why this show works is because of how in depth and how rich they are, and going back to the whole idea of sacrifice and that particular bucket of episodes is 7, 8, and 9. We get to see what sort of sacrifice it is for the people on the Empire side, in particular with Dedra and Cyril, where we see their sacrifice ultimately is their individuality. It's like Dedra sold her soul to sort of move up within the ranks, and Cyril was unknowingly selling his soul and sort of being like a useful tool, without even realizing it. And when he does gets that realization, it's already too late. So yeah, we get to see how the people within the framework of the Empire are just ultimately cogs in the machine. They aren't really making choices for themselves, and when they do express any sort of individuality or their own goals, they suffer for it. And as we see with Dedra, where she ends up at the end of the season, where she tried to take matters into her own hands and got punished for it, much like how Cyril did in the first season when he tried to go after Andor for the murders, and look where that ended up putting him. So yeah, it's just, again, thematically, character-wise, it all just ties in so perfectly.
yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely one of the few shows that really does show the ugly sides of war, or just when you're trying to fight fascism. There are good people on Oh my god, it's such a cringe thing to say. There were some good people in the Empire, like Colonel or whatever the officer's young guy was, the one who kind of reminded me of Dom Hall Gleason with the mustache and stuff, who's been feeding Luthen
Oh,
intel.
Lonnie, yeah.
Lonnie, yeah. He was somebody who's like, I know it's wrong what we're doing. I'm trying to do better, but I gotta watch out for myself and my family. And him and Luthen's last meet in this season was like, damn. But you gotta, when you're really like behind the lines like that, like Luthen was for so many years, you gotta cover yourself. So I think one of those, it's moments like that that's just like almost takes a breath away from you. Like, holy shit, that was so much that we've done with these characters over these like 24 episodes. It's like this is how some of them go out. It's crazy, but again, it's so well done writing. Like, and I think that's why I really like this show overall. Because I got really nothing to criticize on this one. It's just overall, this was just a very well done show to really expand on Star Wars lore. Not to say that Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and some of the other shows haven't, but this one I feel like is so unique because it's got the strongest characters, it's got the strongest motivations for doing what they're doing, and I don't feel like this is fan service. Where the Mandalorian, Ahsoka, even the Acolyte to a certain extent, I feel like it's all fan service in a way. Like they're just doing these, even though Star Wars fans are some of the worst fans. I'm being honest. I'm sorry if you take offense to that, but there have been some horrible things done by fans. Let's not feel like, oh, everybody's innocent, or oh, it's passion. It's not passion. It's just being an idiot. Um, with that being said, like it's just one of those things that this is a show that for people who call it like woke or they just don't like it, it's like, so you don't get the point of the show or you refuse to understand, because this show is so smart, really speaks levels to society today, or when the time the show was written back in the 70s, or the movies were written back in like the 70s and 80s. So yeah, I can't. This is one of those shows. It may be the best of the year. We have to kind of see how the rest play out. But aside from Last of Us, there's really no other show I'm that excited for. I'm definitely, movies are taking forefront this year, but this is one of those ones I'm glad it really expands on the factions of the Empire and the Rebellion and the things they've done to either maintain that power or the things that they do to try and level the playing field. It's just so well done, so dark, but man, just fantastic is the word I would describe it.
And hearing Tony Gilroy, the showrunner and the main writer of the series, like talk about it, that yeah, it's like how you said before, that where you can take the Star Wars out of it and it still works because at the heart of it, it's a story about revolution, and that can fit in any time frame. It could be a historical piece, it could be based on things in reality. Obviously, there's a lot of inspiration taken from real world events, and the way he put it to where that you can sort of release this show and tell the story at any time and it would be relevant. Unfortunately, that's the case, that it would be relevant to events that are going on in the world. And that's, I mean, it's Star Wars. Like you mentioned, from its very inception, it was a very political story, whether people wanted to acknowledge it or not. But this series, more so than a lot of the other Star Wars products, doesn't let you doesn't give you an opportunity to sort of ignore that aspect of Star Wars. Whereas other things within the Star Wars genres, you can get lost in the fantasy and the mysticism of it all. But here, telling a very grounded and human story about revolution, there's no ignoring that aspect. So yeah, I mean, at that point you would have to be willfully ignorant to not sort of see the commentary and see the parallels with things that are going on in real life. And I think that's when narratives are the strongest, when there is a point of view, when there is commentary, and when we tell these stories to tell, give people your perspective, but within the frame of a narrative. That's, I feel like that's where we get the best and richest storytelling. And I mean, I feel like this show just proves that theory right, where you can have really great characters and you can tell these stories with these incredible messages and still be entertaining. There's still the whole fun spy thriller aspect of it, but at the same time, it's not a story that has nothing to say. There's so much to say here, and it just makes that all the much more richer.
Yeah, like I said, man, I started rewatching Rogue One right after I finished the episodes, just because Diego Luna said this season, like, you're gonna want to watch it because it's gonna put in a different light. That can't Cassian's character, and I'm like, yeah, I already see what he's talking about. Just the first part of the movie, I'm like, man, it's so crazy to see his journey to become what he became in Rogue One, and yeah, I'm definitely tempted to rewatch this show again and reinvest my emotions and my heartbreak in it. But I think the only thing I'm gonna say overall, this is one of those few shows that gets a 5 out of 5 through and through. Given it's easy because it's only 2 seasons, but still, for this one to just be that strongly done, that well done in those 2 seasons, and the budget, the effects, everything about it, hard 5 out of 5. I would recommend both. You got to watch all this whole show, especially if you're a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, it's the best Star Wars thing for me, hands down. I mean, everyone's got their favorites and everyone's got their preferences of what they like in a Star Wars story. But for all of my preferences, this really just checks all those boxes. And from the first season to this season, it's been a 5 out of 5 throughout. I mean, for all the reasons we listed, the acting is incredible. The characters are all really well written. The set pieces are engaging and thrilling and fun, and they're shot really well, and the music is great. It's like it's just one of those series that at the end of it just feel fully well crafted from beginning to end. And for me, there isn't like there is no weak spot for me that I can think of. It's just within what they were able to work with, it seems like they executed on all fronts. I have no complaints at all. And yeah, for me, that's why it makes me feel comfortable in saying that this is my favorite Star Wars thing, and easily giving it a 5 out of 5, because it just feels like a truly special series. And yeah, I'm just, as a Star Wars fan, I just feel so lucky to have seen it. So are we gonna get more things like this? I don't know, but I think this series proves that you can have it both ways. You can have the Mandalorian stories. You can have the movies and all those big epic blockbusters, and then you can also tell very intimate, grounded, incredibly engaging stories that are a little bit more challenging. It's really goes to show that Star Wars can be for everyone if we let it, and if we let the creators work with their passions and let them express themselves, and not be sort of hamstrung by what a lot of the fans want.
Massive quote unquote for the word fans. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we get these special stories like Andor and the Skeleton Crew, where when we let the reins go a little bit, as fans, and we let creatives tell the stories they want to tell, that it just goes to show that at the end of the day, if you're a good storyteller, you're going to tell a good story. And I thought this series was an excellent story from beginning to end.
100%. I cannot agree with you more. So yeah, that's the end of this journey in the galaxy far, far away for now, until more movies and all that stuff come out. But for those of you who have watched both seasons, or at least this one, feel free to let us know what you thought in the comments. Again, if I offended you, I somewhat apologize, but I stand by what I said. So until next time, everybody, stay bodacious and keep on ranting for us.
Absolutely, everybody. Be good, be safe, and may the Force be with you.